The Coast Guard, alongside our local, state, and federal partners, has launched a comprehensive investigation to determine exactly what happened, to understand the contributing factors, and to learn from this loss so we can help prevent such tragedies in the future. We are steadfast in our commitment to accountability, continuous improvement, and the safety of our waters. To the families, first responders, and all those impacted, know that we grieve with you. We will not take this lightly, and we will not forget. We owe you answers, and we are committed to finding them.
This isn't the story of a freak accident. It's the story of negligence wearing a uniform, of bureaucracy hiding behind paperwork, of adults well-paid, well-trained, well-positioned, doing nothing while children died. You're not ready for this. Mila Yankelevich, Aaron Kohan, Ariel Buckman, 3 young girls, 3 different families, now bound forever by a moment no one will take responsibility for. They didn't die because of bad weather. They didn't die because they disobeyed instructions. They didn't die because they were reckless kids. They died because grown-ups failed them. In a city obsessed with luxury condos, yacht culture, and perfect optics, safety was an afterthought. Children were sent into shared waters, without barriers, without protection, to sail beside industrial barges dragging massive cranes. Not once, not occasionally, every single day. And no one said, maybe this isn't safe. Because convenience was more important than caution. Profit more than protocol. Reputation more than reform. When 3 girls drowned, some instantly, some slowly, the institutions responded like they always do. We are investigating. We offer our condolences. We followed procedures. But procedures don't bury daughters. Procedures don't sit by hospital beds praying for brain activity. Procedures don't stare into a casket. People do. Let's stop pretending this was a mystery. It wasn't a mystery. It was a math equation of neglect. A barge with a 60-foot crane that blocked the captain's view. No lookout posted despite legal requirements. A sailing camp led by a 19-year-old instructor, guiding children through busy commercial lanes. 0 separation between cargo traffic and children in dinghies. You call that a tragedy? We call it a crime in slow motion. So tell us, who's to blame? The barge company? The tugboat captain? The camp director? The city of Miami? The U.S. Coast Guard? The regulators asleep at the helm? Or is the answer more disturbing than any of that? Is it all of them? Everyone followed the rules. And 3 little girls are dead. So maybe the rules are broken. Maybe we've built a society where we measure liability before we measure loss. Where we weigh lawsuits before we weigh lives. Where we call it just an accident because admitting fault would be too expensive. Picture this. You pack a lunchbox. You tie a life vest. You wave goodbye. And you never see your child again. All because someone else was too comfortable, too careless, too complicit. That's what happened on July 28th, 2025. That's what happened to Mila, to Aaron, to Ariel. 3 girls who didn't have time to scream before the water filled their lungs. One of them, Kalina Gruber, survived. She swam free from beneath the barge, her body covered in lacerations, her mind shattered by trauma. But she lived, and what she remembers is everything. So where is the accountability? Who resigns when kids die? Who loses their job when policies fail? Who stands before grieving parents and says, "This was our fault? We'll wait." You want controversial? Here's controversial. If these girls had been from wealthier zip codes, would the investigation still be pending? If a plane had crashed and killed 3 kids, would it take this long to find out who was at the controls? If this had been a private yacht and not a tugboat, would the silence still be this deafening? Miami loves its boats, but apparently not enough to protect its children from them. Let's be honest. Someone got away with murder. Whether it's the man steering the barge, the director running the camp, or the bureaucrats rubber-stamping danger as routine. And the next time it happens, and it will unless something changes, the blood will be on all our hands. So what are we going to do? Are we going to accept a world where dead children don't make headlines for more than a day? Where lawsuits are settled in silence while parents mourn in public? Where no one is ever punished because the system was technically compliant? Or are we going to demand better? Because change doesn't start in courtrooms. It starts with rage. It starts with grief turned into movement. It starts with people like you refusing to look away. The girls are gone, but you're still here, so act like it. It was just another sun-soaked morning in Biscayne Bay, Florida. Monday, July 28th, 2025. The kind of summer day made for childhood memories, for learning the wind, for catching the light in the curve of a sail, for being brave in a little boat. But by noon, 3 families would be changed forever, and Biscayne Bay would be the scene of one of the most tragic maritime collisions in Florida's recent memory. The Miami Yacht Club has stood proudly along the edge of Watson Island for nearly a century. Through its Youth Sailing Foundation, it offered summer programs for children, teaching discipline, confidence, and love for the sea. That morning, a group of young girls, ages 7 to 13, were setting out with their instructor. 6 of them, bright-eyed, eager, trusting. On board their small sailboat was a 19-year-old counselor, herself barely out of childhood. Among them was Mila Yankelevich, just 7 years old, the youngest on board. Erin Cohan, 13, was the oldest, calm and curious. Ariel Ari Buckman, 10, a spirited soul from Pinecrest, known for her contagious laugh. Kalina Arjen Gruber, 7, carried the adventurous spark of someone far older. 2 other girls, aged 8 and 12, completed the group. What began as a routine lesson would unravel into tragedy within the hour. Around 11:15 a.m., in the waters near Hibiscus Island, the small sailboat entered a channel of shared use. A barge nearly 60 feet long was approaching, tugging behind it a massive crane and heavy construction materials. The exact moment of collision is still under federal investigation. But what we know is this: the barge struck the sailboat with devastating force. The crane mounted atop the barge is believed to have dragged the sailboat under. All 6 people were thrown into the bay. In the chaos, 2 young girls, Mila and Erin, disappeared beneath the surface. By the time they were pulled from the water and rushed to the hospital, it was too late. They were pronounced dead just hours later. Their cause of death, accidental drowning. Emergency crews from Miami Beach Fire Rescue, Miami-Dade, Florida Fish and Wildlife, and the U.S. Coast Guard raced to the scene. 1 child was airlifted. Others were stabilized. Ariel Buckman, critically injured, would fight for her life for 6 more days. And 1 girl, Kalina, was missing until she wasn't. Miraculously, Kalina Arjen Gruber surfaced. She had been trapped beneath the barge, suffering open lacerations from head to toe. In an act of pure survival, she swam free. Bleeding, terrified, but alive. She was 7 years old. 3 children. 3 families from Argentina, Chile, and Florida plunged into mourning. They sent their daughters to learn how to sail. Instead, they buried them. What happened that morning? What could have gone so catastrophically wrong? Initial reports pointed to the crane mounted atop the barge as a major obstruction. A blind spot so wide, the barge's crew may have never seen a sailboat. But Biscayne Bay is a shared space, and the questions only deepen. Should the camp have kept its trainees away from that busy route? Did the 19-year-old instructor have enough experience to navigate such risks? Was the barge properly licensed and maintaining a lookout, as required by maritime law? Who was truly watching the water? Florida Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Coast Guard, and local law enforcement all launched investigations. The barge captain was subjected to a blood draw. No alcohol or drugs were found. No charges were filed. No arrests made. But accountability? That's another story. Attorney Justin Shapiro, representing Kalina's family, publicly stated, "There's a lot of fault to go around. I think operators of both vessels could and should have avoided this collision." That statement would become the core of a growing debate, not just about liability, but about a systemic failure in maritime safety. Biscayne Bay remains as it was, wide, blue, and beautiful. But now there's a shadow in its waters, a quiet grief that follows the breeze, and a lingering question, not just of how this happened, but who will finally answer for it. In the hours after the collision, Biscayne Bay grew silent. The boats were gone. The laughter erased, And somewhere beneath the fluorescent lights of a Miami hospital room, the fight for life began. The youngest survivors of the crash had been pulled from the water broken, bruised, and unconscious. They were just little girls, once full of summer energy, now surrounded by machines, tubes, and prayers. Among them, Ariel Buckman, just 10 years old, a Pinecrest native, a bright light with a sharp wit and tender soul. She would become the last to go. For 6 days, she clung to life, a ventilator helping her breathe, her parents by her side, holding her hand, whispering her name, praying that maybe, just maybe, she'd come back to them. But on Sunday, August 3rd, their miracle never came. Ari passed away from her injuries. The death toll rose to 3. She joined Mila Yankelevich, 7, and Aaron Cohan, 13. 2 other children who didn't survive the first day. They had been full of hope that morning. By sunset, they were gone. All 3 girls from 3 different cultures, countries, and backgrounds, united by one tragedy. Families arrived in tears from Argentina, Chile, and across Miami. Their worlds torn apart. Suitcases replaced by grief. These were not just statistics. These were daughters, and the heartbreak wasn't over yet. Kalina Arjen Gruber, age 7, was found alive, but only barely. Her body bore the map of a trauma. Open lacerations from head to toe. Multiple contusions. Trauma-induced shock. But what no medical report could measure was what she saw. Because Kalina was trapped beneath the barge, held down by weight, darkness, and fear, until she swam out alone and reached the surface. She survived, but the part of her that was carefree didn't. Her family, in a public statement, said, "She is physically healing, but the trauma is deep. She cries out in the night. She remembers the screams, the sinking, the silence." Released from Jackson Memorial Hospital on August 1st, Kalina went home to a city that couldn't understand how such a thing had happened. Another 8-year-old girl remained in critical condition. The 12-year-old and the 19-year-old counselor were not hospitalized, though their emotional scars are unknown. 6 went out that morning. 3 came home, and not one of them will ever be the same. As the families grieved, the city searched for answers. The barge had moved through a shared-use section of Biscayne Bay, near the path used by youth sailing programs. The vessel was carrying a towering crane, one that potentially blocked all forward visibility. Witnesses say the crew had no lookout posted, that the sailboat was in plain view, but no one saw it. And then there's the other side, a small sailboat with 6 passengers, led by a 19-year-old counselor. Was she experienced enough? Was the route pre-approved? Was there a safety boat nearby? Did the camp ignore the risks of operating so close to industrial waterways? Attorney Justin Shapiro, speaking for Kalina's family, was direct. There's a lot of fault to go around. I think operators of both vessels could and should have avoided this collision. No criminal charges have been filed. Toxicology tests on the barge captain were negative. The U.S. Coast Guard opened a formal investigation, but with 3 young girls gone and no clear villain, the public began to ask, was this an accident or a systemic failure? Federal maritime rules require a proper lookout on all commercial vessels, safe speed in shared waters, and vigilant awareness of smaller craft. Did the barge's crane block its own compliance? Did camp staff underestimate the threat of being in the barge's path? Every answer breeds another question. And in the middle of it all, 3 little girls whose only mistake was getting in the boat. Oh, sorry. Their names now whispered by waves. Their absence felt in every gust of wind across the bay. There are protocols for safety, for vision, for distance, for speed. But on July 28th, they all failed. And in that failure, innocence was lost. Water doesn't leave evidence behind. It doesn't hold fingerprints. It doesn't shout when something goes wrong. It just swallows, then moves on. But in the wake of a tragedy, the water can't tell us who's responsible. That job is ours. And in Biscayne Bay on July 28, 2025, 3 young girls lost their lives. Now the world wants to know, who let this happen? The barge, massive, industrial, and unyielding, was carrying a crane across the bay. Operated by a tug, it was bound for a construction site. A witness described the barge as a floating wall, and the crane on top, a blinding tower of steel. Experts reviewing the incident raised a crucial question. Could the barge operator even see the sailboat? Maritime law is clear. Every vessel, regardless of size, must maintain a proper lookout by sight and hearing. They must be able to detect any risk of collision. And if there is a blind spot, the vessel must compensate, either with additional crew, radar, or reduced speed. But no one saw the children. It is believed that the crane mounted atop the barge may have created a complete forward blind spot. If true, the barge was navigating partially blind in one of Florida's busiest recreational waters during an active youth sailing session. No additional lookout was posted. No emergency maneuver was attempted. No horn was sounded. The tug kept moving forward. According to the U.S. Coast Guard, toxicology tests on the barge captain were negative. No charges were filed. And to this day, the identities of the crew have not been made public. But lack of criminal liability is not the same as lack of accountability. On the other side of the story, a small white sailboat, 6 souls on board, most of them under the age of 13. That boat was part of the Miami Youth Sailing Foundation, operating out of the Miami Yacht Club, a program built on discipline, courage, and the joy of being on water. But was joy enough? The instructor on board that day was 19 years old. Experienced? Maybe. Qualified? Unknown. Was she trained to handle sudden traffic in commercial zones? Did she have the authority to override camp policy? Were proper escape drills ever practiced with the children? These questions remain unanswered, not just by the camp, but by the system that allowed it all to operate so closely to danger. The channel where the crash occurred is heavily trafficked, used by ferries, industrial barges, tour boats, and leisure crafts. And yet, children's sailboats were navigating the same waters. Was this legal? Yes. Was it safe? Ask the families. Attorney Justin Shapiro, representing one of the victims, made the implications clear. There's a lot of fault to go around. Operators of both vessels could and should have avoided this collision. His words echoed far beyond the courthouse, because this wasn't a case of freak, weather, or reckless joyriding. This was a case of invisible negligence by people, policies, and oversight structures that should have never let this happen. Multiple agencies were and still are investigating, but coordination has been slow. Families have been left waiting. No public safety report has been released. And despite the scale of loss, no resignations, no reform announcements. This isn't just about one barge or one camp. It's about how shared waters are regulated and how young lives are protected or not. In U.S. maritime law, liability is often shared. In civil court, both the barge and the camp could be found partially at fault. But in the meantime, families are burying children, while institutions pass the blame like a life vest no one wants to wear. And the law doesn't heal trauma. It doesn't answer the deeper question. Why were these children even allowed to be there unprotected in the path of danger? This was not a rogue accident. It was a systemic failure. A failure to define clear safety zones for youth programs. A failure to enforce visibility standards for industrial transport. A failure to hold leaders accountable before lives were lost. And in that failure, we find the most damning truth of all. Everyone was following the rules. And still, 3 little girls died. Mila Yankelevich, Erin Cohan, Ariel Buckman. They didn't choose the barge route. They didn't build the crane. They didn't set the safety protocols. They didn't approve the camp location. But they paid the price because adults didn't do enough to protect them. 3 funerals later, 1 child deeply traumatized, and still no one has stood before a microphone to say, "We failed. If we don't ask these questions now, we never will." Who authorized the barge route during a youth sailing session? Why weren't secondary lookouts mandated on vessels with visual obstructions? Why weren't children sailing in zones separated from industrial marine traffic? Who signs off on what safety means in shared waters? And most importantly, who will speak for the girls who can't? This isn't just about 3 girls. It's about every child who steps into a boat, trusting adults to protect them. It's about every mother who lets go of her daughter's hand, believing she's safe. It's about every institution that confuses routine with risk-free. Let this be the last time. Let this be the moment when cities, camps, operators, and regulators say, no more, no more blind spots, no more silence, no more avoidable deaths. Biscayne Bay is still. The sails have been folded. The wind is waiting. What we do next will determine whether their names are remembered as victims or as the reason we finally open our eyes.